The truth is brutal, and it cuts sharper than any blade. They never wanted to destroy you outright. That would have been too obvious, too quick, too easy to spot. What they really wanted was far colder, to strip you down piece by piece in public until your confidence collapsed under the weight of shame. They wanted you to bleed in silence while they smiled in your face. And let's not sugarcoat it, you lived through what most people wouldn't survive. Because what you faced wasn't random drama, and it wasn't just a bad chapter of life. It was organized. It was staged. It was a humiliation ritual meant to break your spirit while the crowd was watching. This is the kind of thing used in toxic power structures, manipulation rings, and even cult-like groups, where public disgrace is the oldest weapon in their arsenal. Why? Because humiliation doesn't just hurt in the moment. It's designed to stain you, to brand you, to make you carry the weight of a lie that wasn't yours to begin with. And whether you realized it or not, you weren't invited to that ritual. You were made into the offering. Think back. Remember how they disguised it. They called it concern. They painted it as discipline. They framed it as you needing to learn a lesson. But in reality, it was nothing less than a psychological execution dressed in a smile. They didn't want to just silence you. They wanted you to doubt your own reflection. They wanted you to apologize for being wounded after they stabbed you. And here's the truth that unsettles them most. You didn't give them the breakdown they prayed for. You didn't lose your mind. You didn't beg for their approval, and you didn't even expose them outright. Instead, you discerned. And that's what saved your life. Because discernment is lethal to manipulators. It's the quiet voice that tells you when something is off, the gut pull that makes you step aside before the trap closes. While they thought you were paralyzed, you were analyzing. While they rehearsed their little play, you were reading their lines before they spoke them. That's why you're still standing now, while they hide in corners, hoping you won't connect the dots for others. Chosen ones, if you've ever felt this in your bones, stop right here and press the like button, subscribe, and keep this voice alive. This is bigger than a video, it's a movement. Every click, every share is a way to throw light on what they tried to bury. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this mission. Now let's go deeper. The silence after what you survived isn't empty, it's charged. It's like standing in the aftermath of a storm, where the air feels different, the sky feels clearer, and the ground still carries the memory of chaos. That's where you are right now. The people who tried to erase you are unsettled by that silence because it means their plan failed. They see you walking in your own lane, not broken but sharper, and it terrifies them because now every move you make is a reminder of the battle they lost. If life were a series, that ritual would have been the season finale. All eyes were on you, waiting for you to collapse, waiting for the credits to roll on your story. But here's the twist. You renewed the show, and this time, the snakes aren't in the cast. You came back with a new script, one they can't read, one they can't twist. And that's why they're nervous. Because humiliation rituals are supposed to end with silence and defeat. But instead, yours ended with survival, awareness, and power. Look back at history and you'll see it repeated. The universe always exposes those who scheme in the shadows. Every society that used shame as control eventually collapsed under its own lies. Every manipulator who thought they could erase someone ended up erased themselves by truth, by exposure, or by the weight of their own guilt. You're standing in that same pattern right now. Their effort to bury you has already become the evidence that lifts you. And this isn't just about survival, it's about revelation. You now know the system. You've seen behind the curtain. You understand why they needed you weak, why your clarity was a threat, and why your silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. They underestimated your patience, your ability to endure without folding. They thought dragging you through fire would turn you into ashes. Instead, you became proof that the flames couldn't claim you. The story they tried to write for you is over. You hold the pen now, and the universe has a way of making sure that no humiliation ritual, no matter how loud or cruel, ever has the final word. The final word belongs to you. Your discernment, your resilience, your quiet strength that stood tall when the crowd was waiting for you to bow. That's the truth they can't erase. And listen closely, chosen one, because this isn't just another story you stumbled across online. This is your survival guide, carved out of pain you already know too well. You walked through a humiliation ritual designed to strip you bare, yet here you are, still breathing, still sharper than they ever expected. That alone proves you're not ordinary. Most would have folded, most would have drowned in the shame, but you didn't, and that's why you're here with me right now. So here's what I need you to do. If you know deep down that discernment saved your life, drop the number 777 in the comments. That's the mark of someone who sees through the masks, someone who knows how dangerous it is to be awake in a world that wants you asleep. And if this message is striking your heart, don't just listen quietly. Press that like button, subscribe, and stand with this collective voice of survivors. Every click keeps this truth alive. Because now we're about to break it all down step by step. And believe me, if you are truly chosen, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Let's get started. Number 1, they tried to drag you through mud because your light exposed their dirt. They didn't attack you because you were weak. They attacked you because you revealed what they wanted hidden. Let's call it what it is. They didn't humiliate you because they thought you were beneath them. No, your presence was the mirror that exposed just how filthy they really were. You walked into spaces where lies were the language, where manipulation was the handshake, and where betrayal was just another strategy. You didn't play by those rules. You didn't bow to the unspoken codes. And your clarity, your honesty, your refusal to bend to filth, that's what made them choke. So they reached for the oldest weapon in the book, staining your image. If they could smear you, if they could taint your reputation, then maybe they could make people forget the truth your very existence brought into the room. Because here's the ugly fact. They didn't want you gone. They wanted you doubted. They didn't want to kill you outright. They wanted you alive, but silenced, walking around second-guessing yourself. That was the ritual, to turn your reflection into your enemy. And here's where it hits harder. They almost pulled it off, didn't they? There were moments where you caught yourself thinking, am I overreacting? Maybe it's me. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I really am the problem. That's how psychological warfare works. It doesn't scream in your face. It whispers doubts into your head until you're fighting yourself more than you're fighting them. And once you're doubting yourself, you're easier to control. But here's what they underestimated: discernment. That quiet, razor-sharp instinct the universe planted inside you. It's not just intuition, it's survival. While they laughed behind your back, you were cataloging every smirk. While they staged their fake concern, you clocked the timing. While they performed loyalty for the crowd, you noticed the small betrayals, the little barbs tucked inside compliments, the way silence turned into complicity. They thought the pain would blind you, but pain became the magnifying glass that revealed every hidden crack. Discernment is dangerous to deceivers because it forces them into the light they can't survive in. And now, here's what you need to hear. Their smear campaign never defined you. It defined them. Look at the tactics they used: lies, gossip, Public stunts designed to embarrass you. Think about that. Strong people don't waste energy trying to stain someone else. Only the weak do that. Only people who know they can't stand next to you clean will resort to throwing dirt. And dirt only sticks if you lie down in it. You refused. That's why you're still glowing, and that's why they're still bitter. Let me put it this way. Imagine a diamond pulled through mud. Does the mud change the diamond? No. The mud gets washed away and the diamond remains untouchable. That's you. They tried to drag you through filth because they wanted people to see the mud, not the brilliance underneath. But the more pressure they applied, the more obvious it became that you weren't like them. The crowd might not have understood at the time, but over time, the truth always works its way to the surface. And I know what you might be asking yourself right now. If I was so dangerous to them, why didn't they just leave me alone? The answer is simple, because your existence was already too loud. Even in silence, you were a threat. Even when you said nothing, your spirit made noise they couldn't ignore. You reminded them of everything they weren't, and that burned. So they tried to turn the spotlight on your flaws, to distract from their own filth. Here's another hard truth. They weren't fighting you. They were fighting the reflection of themselves that your purity forced them to see. Your clean spirit made their corruption undeniable. And instead of changing, instead of facing themselves, they chose the coward's route. Attack the mirror, stain the glass, smear the reflection. But mirrors don't break that easily, and you didn't shatter the way they expected. They wanted your silence to be shame, but it became strategy. They wanted your tears to be weakness, but they became clarity. Let's talk about that silence for a moment. People may have wondered why you didn't clap back, why you didn't scream louder, why you didn't expose everything you knew. But that silence wasn't weakness, it was control. You knew that reacting would only feed the fire. You knew that your restraint was more unsettling than any outburst, and in holding back, you allowed their true colors to bleed through without interference. That's why, now, when the dust has settled, the record is clear. You didn't have to shout. Time shouted for you. So what's the outcome? The very humiliation they designed for your downfall became your testimony of resilience. What was meant to stain you ended up staining them. What was meant to silence you ended up sharpening your voice. And what was meant to bury you became the soil where your discernment took root and grew stronger. And here's the part that makes them restless at night. You can't be humiliated the same way twice. Once you wake up, once you've seen the patterns, you'll never fall for the setup again. You'll walk into rooms and spot the traps before the nets even drop. You'll see the shade in the compliment, the betrayal in the handshake, the lie in the smile. And that makes you unbreakable. That makes you untouchable. That makes you the one thing they can't stand, a survivor with eyes wide open. So if you've been questioning why you had to go through it, here's your answer. They tried to stain you because they couldn't stand beside you. They tried to drag you down because your very existence was proof of everything they lacked. They wanted to erase you, but instead they exposed themselves. And now you carry that power forward, not just as someone who survived, but as someone who woke up, someone who understands the game and refuses to play it, someone who knows that discernment isn't just instinct, it's armor. And with that armor, you're walking into every new space knowing you can't be touched the same way again. Once you've been dragged through mud and still shine, there's nothing left they can do to dim you. Number 2. Rejection wasn't them turning you away. It was the universe stripping off their mask. Rejection is rarely about your worth. It's almost always a mirror exposing theirs. Let's start with a brutal fact. What you went through wasn't rejection. Not really. It felt like rejection, yes, cold shoulders, fake friends vanishing, doors slammed in your face. But underneath that sting, something deeper was happening. It was an X-ray. The universe wasn't punishing you. It was scanning every connection, every relationship, every hidden tie that couldn't walk with you into your next chapter. That's why it hurt so specifically, so sharply, every betrayal, every humiliation, every moment of being mocked or excluded. It wasn't random, it was surgical. It was like being stripped open under a blinding light, not to destroy you, but to expose what you couldn't see on your own. Sometimes rejection isn't rejection, it's revelation. It's the mask slipping off before the performance can fool you. Think about it. You thought people suddenly changed, like their hearts flipped overnight. But the truth, they were simply showing you who they had always been. The rejection wasn't new. The performance just ended. That silence, the smear campaigns, the casual betrayals, they weren't accidents. They were the universe pulling the curtain back, forcing you to see raw truth without makeup, without excuses. Now, I know the question boiling in your head, but why did it have to be so loud? Why did it have to be so public, so humiliating, so messy? Because if it had been quiet, you would have explained it away. You would have kept making excuses for them in private. You would have carried dead weight, smiling masks, and hidden daggers into your future. That couldn't happen. So the universe made sure it was undeniable, loud enough to echo, painful enough to brand itself into your memory, final enough that you could never unsee it again. Imagine this. You're walking with a backpack you don't realize is filled with bricks. It feels heavy, but you've carried it so long that you think it's normal. Then suddenly, someone rips it off your shoulders in the middle of a crowd. You feel naked, embarrassed, furious even. But later you realize they didn't steal from you. They freed you. That's what rejection really was. They were removing bricks disguised as friends. The things you lost weren't losses at all. They were illusions dissolving under the weight of truth. You didn't lose true relationships. You lost masks. You didn't lose opportunities. You lost distractions dressed up as blessings. What you gained was sight. You learned to read the tension in a fake smile. You learned to hear the poison in a sweet tone. You learned to trust your gut the first time instead of waiting for evidence. That discernment was paid for in pain, but it's priceless now. Let's ask another question. If I was being refined, why did it feel like punishment? Why did it feel like everyone was against me? Because exposure feels cruel in the moment. It feels like the ground crumbling under your feet. But purification is never gentle. Think of fire refining gold. Think of storms clearing dead branches from trees. Think of surgery cutting open the wound before healing can start. None of that feels kind, but all of it is necessary. Imagine a surgeon walking into the operating room with gloves, a scalpel, and a bright light. If you don't know what's happening, it looks like an attack. You're strapped down, cut open, exposed in front of strangers. But it's not punishment. It's precision. It's saving your life. That's what your rejection was. Surgical exposure. It cut away what was rotting, what was fake, what was designed to hold you hostage in silence. They didn't throw you out. You were delivered. They didn't reject you. You were redirected. And let's be real, you saw the patterns, didn't you? You noticed the timing. You noticed how quickly loyalty crumbled the moment you didn't play along. You noticed how some people celebrated your downfall a little too eagerly, as if they'd been waiting for it all along. That wasn't coincidence. That was exposure. You weren't losing allies. You were discovering who was never with you. Imagine standing under a black light in a dark room. At first, everything looks fine, but once the light switches on, the stains appear, the dirt glows, the hidden mess can't be ignored. That's what happened when rejection hit. The black light flipped on. The people around you couldn't keep their true colors hidden anymore, and now you're standing in a different place. What felt like loss became purification. What looked like isolation became insulation. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared, because where you're going, only the authentic can follow. Everything fake had to be flushed out, publicly, painfully, and permanently. Rejection isn't the universe pushing you down, it's the universe pulling you through. And here's the most powerful part: you'll never see rejection the same way again. The next time someone tries to push you aside, you'll pause and ask, is this rejection or is this protection? That's discernment. That's clarity. And once you have that, you stop begging to sit at tables that poison your spirit. You stop chasing doors that were never meant to open for you. You stop crying over masks that fell off and shattered. So let me tell you this with no softness. You weren't rejected. You were refined. You weren't excluded. You were extracted. And now, every step you take forward is lighter, sharper, cleaner. The ritual of humiliation tried to break you, but all it did was X-ray the room and show you who belonged and who didn't. And you, chosen one, you didn't just survive it. You saw it, and once you've seen, you can never be fooled again. Number 3. They didn't want you gone. They wanted you caged and quiet. Your silence was worth more to them than your death, because silence meant they could keep feeding without resistance. Let's strip the mask off this one. They didn't want you dead. Death would have been too obvious, too messy, too easy to expose. No, their plan was darker. They wanted you alive but numb. They wanted you walking but disconnected. They wanted you doubting your own thoughts, second-guessing your every instinct, slowly cutting the wire between you and your inner compass. Because once you no longer trusted yourself, they knew they could control you without lifting a hand. And that's the twisted brilliance of it. Enemies don't always show up with knives or open threats. The most dangerous ones smile while they plant seeds of doubt. They laugh while slipping poison into the conversation. Every joke comes with a sting. Every compliment carries a shadow. Over time, they make you believe that your light is an inconvenience, that your presence is too much, that your truth is dangerous. Imagine this: a bird isn't killed. It's locked in a cage with the door wide open, but the bird has been trained to think it can't fly. That's what they wanted for you. Not your death, your containment. They wanted you shrinking into the background, thinking humility meant silencing yourself, when really it was programming. Some enemies don't want to destroy you. They want to keep you small enough to use. And here's the cruelest part. They wanted you to disqualify yourself. They wanted you to carry shame so deeply that you'd stop applying for opportunities, stop showing up boldly, stop using your voice. That way, they could keep feeding on your energy while making sure you never realized how powerful you actually are. But then something happened they never planned for. Your discernment switched on. That gut pull, that quiet knowing, that whisper, this isn't right. You began noticing the tone shifts, the backhanded praise, the fake support. You didn't explode, and that's what scared them most. You observed, you pulled back, you guarded your spirit. Now, the one outcome they feared most is staring them in the face. You're still alive, still moving, and now you see everything. And once you see, you can never be caged again. Number 4. Your public humiliation triggered the alarm that exposed their hidden network. The day they tried to disgrace you, they didn't just reveal their hatred. They revealed their entire system of control. Let's not sugarcoat it. The moment they dragged your name through the dirt in public, they set off an alarm they couldn't silence. Suddenly, people who barely knew you had something to say. Strangers shifted their eyes when you walked into the room. Whispers multiplied like smoke in a closed space. At first, it felt unreal. Why was everyone invested in your downfall? But then it clicked. You hadn't just been dealing with individuals. You had been dealing with a cult of control, a hidden web of gossip, manipulation, and false loyalty. Some enemies don't fight alone. They move in packs, bound by fear and dysfunction. And your awakening, it set their house of cards on fire. You became a threat the moment you refused to shrink. The second you started protecting your peace, drawing boundaries and questioning their games, they shifted from passive shade to open aggression. Not because you harmed them, but because you stopped letting them handle you like a puppet. Imagine this: you flip on the light in a dark basement. Cockroaches scatter in every direction. They were always there. You just couldn't see them until the light exposed them. That's exactly what your humiliation ritual did. It showed who was whispering behind closed doors, who smiled in your face but smirked in your absence, who pretended to be neutral but quietly fueled the fire. That wasn't chaos. That was coordination. And here's the kicker: coordination doesn't come from strength, it comes from fear. They feared what might happen if you spoke up, if you revealed what they couldn't bury, if your truth spread wider than their lies. You became their mirror, and mirrors terrify people who live in denial. They thought shaming you would isolate you. Instead, it exposed their alliance. Public humiliation wasn't just punishment, it was a cover-up, a desperate attempt to turn the spotlight away from themselves. But in trying to destroy you, they ended up revealing the very cult they wanted to keep hidden. And you, chosen one, didn't just endure it, you decoded it. Now you know, they were never random individuals. They were a system, and the moment you survived, the system cracked. Number 5. Discernment isn't a skill, it's the blade that kept you alive. What they called paranoia was really your radar saving you from their traps. Let's get this straight: discernment is not some soft trait you carry like a personality quirk. For you, chosen one, discernment has been the difference between survival and destruction. While most people treat intuition like background noise, sometimes noticing it, often ignoring it, you've lived through betrayals wrapped in smiles. You've seen sabotage hiding behind helping hands. You didn't have the luxury of brushing off your instincts. Survival demanded you sharpen them until they became a weapon. Think of it like this: while everyone else is walking blindfolded, you're moving with night vision. Your discernment isn't a whisper, it's a siren. It scans every word, every gesture, every pause in the air. You don't just sense energy, you track it. You catch the hesitation in someone's laugh, the sharpness hidden in a compliment, the sudden silence that speaks louder than words. To outsiders, it looks mysterious, even suspicious. To you, it's simple. Your life has depended on it. Discernment isn't luck, it's your built-in radar screaming, "Move now, or you'll regret it later." And how many times did it save you? From the relationship that looked perfect on paper but would have drained your soul, from the opportunity that was really a cage disguised as a blessing, from rooms where your name was already being dissected before you even entered. That wasn't coincidence. That was your radar intercepting the ambush before it hit. Imagine a soldier walking through a minefield. Everyone else strolls carelessly, but you've learned to feel the ground shift under your feet. You stop where others step. You move when others freeze. That's what discernment has done for you. And here's what unsettles your enemies most. They can't predict you. They think you should have been trapped, humiliated, erased. But somehow, every time, you sidestep their snares. They call it paranoia. They call it luck. But deep down, they know the truth. You saw through their masks before they even finished putting them on. Chosen ones don't guess. They know. And when you know, you don't need evidence. You just move, alive and untouchable. That's why you're still standing, because discernment wasn't just your gift, it was your blade, and you wielded it well. Number 6. They tested you like a threat because your truth shattered their illusions. They didn't test you to understand you. They tested you to break you because your very existence proved their lies couldn't stand. Make no mistake, chosen one, they never tested you out of curiosity. It wasn't admiration, it wasn't respect. It was fear. Fear of what you carried. Fear of what your presence revealed without you even trying. You didn't walk in waving banners or shouting your worth. You simply showed up with a pure heart, clear intentions, and no hidden agenda. And that alone shook them to their core. You were proof that healing is possible, proof that forgiveness doesn't require revenge, proof that someone can walk through fire and still come out unburned, still soft-hearted, still uncorrupted. You didn't just say truth, you embodied it. And for people who built their survival on manipulation and control, your presence wasn't comforting, it was confronting. You were the mirror they never asked for, and mirrors don't lie. Think of it like this. Counterfeit money looks real until it's placed next to the genuine bill. That's what your life did to them. You exposed the cracks they worked so hard to hide. You weren't trying to expose them, but your choices, your energy, your dignity, all of it became the proof they couldn't fake. So they had to test you, not to understand you, but to discredit you. They wanted to know if your light was real or just another performance like theirs. That's why they pushed you, mocked you, and provoked you. They needed to see if you'd crack under pressure, if you'd retaliate, if you'd fold like they would. But you didn't. You stood. You kept your dignity after they stripped you of everything, and that's when they realized you weren't one of them. You couldn't be bought. You couldn't be converted. You couldn't be controlled. You weren't too much. You were too real for their illusions to survive. That's why they called you too sensitive or too deep. It wasn't truth, it was projection, because what you carried threatened everything fake about them, and that's why they treated you like an enemy, not because you attacked them, but because you proved, simply by existing, that they could not fake forever. Number 7. When their shadow games failed, they built a circus to distract from their defeat. The louder they screamed about you, the clearer it became. They had nothing left but noise. It always begins in the shadows, whispers behind closed doors, accidents that weren't accidents, subtle setups designed to bleed you out slowly, all while keeping their hands clean. They wanted you to self-destruct without anyone ever tracing it back to them, but you didn't. You noticed. You adjusted. You kept showing up when they expected you to vanish, and that unsettled them. Private sabotage only works when you're blind to it, but once your eyes opened, their grip slipped. The shade lost its sting, the quiet sabotage lost its power, and that's when fear pushed them into desperation. If they couldn't destroy you in silence, they would drag you into the spotlight and build a spectacle around your name. When whispers fail, cowards turn to noise. Imagine this, a thief caught mid-act. Suddenly they start shouting about someone else, hoping the crowd looks away from their crime. That's what they did. They inflated your flaws. They dragged your past into rooms where it didn't belong. They twisted stories, exaggerated mistakes, and turned the volume high enough to drown out your truth. It wasn't about facts, it was about force. But here's where their plan backfired. They thought shame would silence you. They thought spectacle would isolate you. Instead, the more they screamed, the more obvious their obsession became. People started to notice. When someone spends that much energy tearing down someone who isn't even fighting back, questions start getting asked. Who's really the problem here? Why are they so invested in destroying you if you're nothing? Their circus wasn't your exposure, it was their confession. The stage they built to shame you became the spotlight on their own sickness. Every accusation revealed their obsession. Every smear revealed their insecurity. And you endured. You didn't collapse. You didn't clap back. You let their fire burn out under its own weight. In the end, you outlasted their circus. And that survival wasn't just victory, it was proof. Proof that you were never the problem. Proof that their control had already slipped away. Number 8. They tried to bury you in shame, but you turned it into oxygen. Shame was their weapon, but it became your training ground. Understand this. Embarrassment wasn't the end goal. Their real ritual was shame. They wanted you suffocated, replaying their words on loop, questioning yourself long after they stopped speaking. Their goal was simple: make you turn against yourself. Because once you're at war with your own reflection, they don't even have to lift a finger. But you didn't drown. You adapted, slowly, painfully, powerfully. Every time they dragged you deeper, something inside you shifted. You weren't just sinking, you were transforming. You began to see the tricks for what they were. The gaslighting, the guilt trips, the twisted truths. They lost their magic when you stopped trying to argue with people who needed you to play the villain. They thought silence meant defeat. It really meant evolution. Imagine being thrown into an ocean without warning. At first you panic, you fight the waves, you swallow water. But then you learn. You find rhythm in the chaos. You grow gills. That's exactly what happened to you. In an environment so toxic others would collapse, you learned to stay clear-headed. You built peace in the middle of storms. The very shame meant to suffocate you became your oxygen. Those attacks sharpened your emotional intelligence. The same rooms that once triggered you became training grounds. The same insults that once broke you became data points. Where others would drown, you became a deep diver, able to read currents before they even formed. They didn't realize teaching you to breathe underwater only made you unstoppable. Now, when manipulation shows up, you don't panic. You've already trained in deeper waters. You know how to recognize the shift in tone, the trap in a compliment, the game before it even begins. They wanted you terrified of the deep, but now you are the deep. They can't drown you in shame anymore because you've turned it into your strength. And that's the irony. They tried to bury you, but instead they built your endurance. You no longer fear the weight of their words. You don't suffocate in their silence. You breathe where others choke. That's why their rituals failed. You didn't just survive them, you mastered them. Number 9. They wrapped chains in the words love and loyalty, but it was a ritual of sacrifice. Not every I love you is love. Sometimes it's the wrapping paper around a cage. They didn't come at you with knives in their hands. They came with soft words: love, loyalty, family. Words designed to make you drop your guard. Words you wanted so badly to believe. And for a time, you did. But beneath those phrases was never love. It was a ritual. A slow, methodical grooming for sacrifice, disguised as care. Every concern they voiced wasn't protection, it was a leash. Every favor they extended wasn't generosity, it was a trap. Every time they called it loyalty, what they really meant was control. And the family they promised? It wasn't a home, it was a cage. The deadliest blade isn't metal, it's manipulation wrapped in affection. The knife they prepared for you was never physical, it was psychological. The plan was the slow death of your potential, your joy, your future. They wanted you drained, yet grateful. That was the trick. They wanted you to thank them while they bled you dry, but your discernment wouldn't let it slide. Even when your mind couldn't explain it, your spirit picked up the pattern. You saw how help always came with strings. You noticed how love always demanded your silence. You realized what they called protection was really preparation for your downfall. Imagine a lamb being led with ribbons around its neck, believing it's loved, while in reality it's being groomed for slaughter. That's what they tried to make of you, but you woke up before the blade could fall. Once you recognize that a leash is not love, you stop mistaking captivity for care. The truth rattled you, but it also set you free. Because once you saw the ritual for what it was, you stopped playing their game. You stopped mistaking manipulation for devotion. You stopped handing over your power in the name of loyalty. The knife they raised was never meant for your body. It was meant for your spirit, but you survived. Your discernment cracked the illusion wide open, and now, instead of walking away drained, you walk away alive, wiser and untouchable. Number 10. Your spirit was the mirror. They couldn't escape, so they tried to smash it. They didn't hate you for what you did. They hated you for what your presence exposed. The venom they spat at you was never really about you. It was about the reflection you held up, without even trying. Your spirit, uncorrupted and clean, became a mirror they couldn't stomach. You weren't just yourself. You were a reminder of everything they buried, denied, and plastered over with lies. For years they built walls around their shame. They patched cracks with excuses, painted rot with fake smiles, and mastered the art of performance to cover regret. Then you showed up. Not loud, not forceful, just honest, pure, and untwisted. And suddenly, all their carefully hidden decay lit up in your presence like mold under a blacklight. Your truth didn't insult them, it exposed them. That's why their anger felt so irrational, so venomous. They weren't mad because you wronged them. They were mad because you reminded them of the gap between who they pretended to be and who they truly were. That gap was unbearable. And instead of facing it, they turned their rage on you. Imagine someone standing before a mirror. They don't like what they see. Instead of changing themselves, they smash the glass. That's what they tried to do to you. Your spirit was their mirror, and rather than heal, they attacked the reflection. They thought if they broke you, they could erase the truth you carried. But mirrors don't vanish when shattered. The truth still stares back, undeniable. They fought you not because you were their enemy, but because you made denial impossible. So they lashed out. They tried to dim your light, to twist your words, to drag you down into their shadow. But here's the twist. They failed, because their hatred was projection, their venom was fear, and their war was never with you. It was with the reflection they couldn't bear to face. And you endured. While their spirit drowned in shadow, yours stayed clean. While they collapsed under denial, you survived under truth. That's why their hate felt so heavy. It wasn't personal, it was survival. But the reflection remains, and so do you. Number 11. What they called bullying was the universe marking you different. They thought they were mocking you, but they were stamping you with proof you'd never belong to their crowd. Let's cut straight through it. What happened to you wasn't ordinary bullying. It looked like that on the surface, sure. The whispers, the laughter, the staged humiliation. But it was bigger. It was initiation. A brutal rite of passage that masqueraded as rejection. The world may have called it shame, but in truth, it was the opening act of your elevation. Here's the paradox they'll never admit. Real power rarely comes dressed in comfort. It almost always comes wrapped in disgrace. The deeper the fall looks in public, the higher the rise is in private. You weren't randomly targeted. You were singled out, marked, pressed through fire, not because you were weak, but because you were being separated from the crowd that could never walk where you're headed. Rejection isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's a seal that you don't belong with the ordinary. Most people are built to blend in. They bend to trends, melt into backgrounds, play life safe. But you were never cut for that. You were forged for solitude, the kind of isolation that only leaders can carry. And the only way to carve someone apart from the masses is through public rejection. That was your stamp. That was your crown being placed in disguise. Imagine a soldier being broken down in boot camp, stripped, tested, mocked, before being built into something unshakable. That's what your humiliation was. It was less a beating and more a branding. It marked you as different. It proved you weren't theirs to break. They wanted to erase you, but instead they crowned you with resilience no crowd can buy. The shame they threw at you was supposed to silence you, but it amplified you instead. It forced you to lean on yourself in ways the average person will never understand. It sharpened clarity, birthed strength, and built a resilience that only isolation can forge. They wanted you erased. Instead, they revealed you were never made for the crowd. You were made for the throne, and the throne is only found when you stand apart. Number 12. They branded you crazy because your clarity exposed their delusion. When truth walks into the room, lies always scream, crazy. They threw every label they could at you: crazy, paranoid, emotional, delusional. Not because those words described you, but because they were desperate to protect themselves. Labels weren't reflections. They were weapons. They weren't statements of fact. They were shields meant to guard their fragile illusions from the light you carried. They didn't call you crazy because you lost your mind. They called you crazy because your sanity was cutting through their stories like a blade. You saw through their cracks, their fake smiles, their shaky narratives. You refused to play along, and that terrified them. So they did the oldest trick in the book: discredit the messenger so they could bury the message. They call you paranoid when you notice patterns. They call you emotional when your feelings expose their coldness. They call you delusional when your vision stretches further than their shallow lies. Every insult they pinned on you was really a confession of what they feared most. They weren't describing you, they were describing their panic in the face of your clarity. Imagine a house of cards built tall and fragile. All it takes is one gust of wind to show how unstable it is. That gust was you. Your presence made their lies wobble. Your sanity was the threat, not your supposed madness. And look at them now, silent. Their silence is louder than all the labels they once screamed. They know the truth is on your side. They know the cracks in their foundation are spreading. That stillness they wear, it isn't strength, it's fear. Fear that the truth you carry will crush the illusions they live in. Your clarity was never weakness. It was the proof their whole system couldn't survive. They wanted the world to see you as unstable, but the opposite is true. Your sharp vision, your discernment, your refusal to bow to their games, that's what makes you untouchable. The labels were never about you. They were smokescreens thrown up to distract from their own rot. And now, as their lies crumble, the reflection staring back at them terrifies them more than anything else. Number 13. They confused your silence for defeat, but it was the calm before their collapse. Restraint isn't weakness. It's the sharpest blade patience can forge. They thought your silence meant surrender. They saw your calm, your refusal to take the bait, your unwillingness to roll in the mud with them, and they laughed. They mistook restraint for fragility. They believed mocking you, betraying you, and pushing you would eventually break you. But here's what they never understood. Restraint is not surrender. Restraint is strategy. You didn't need fists. You didn't need screaming matches. You became an investigator in plain sight. You watched, you remembered, you read the patterns, every slip of the tongue, every contradiction, every mask sliding out of place. It all went into your mental ledger. While they thought you were powerless, you were quietly collecting the evidence of their downfall. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening where they can't see it. They mocked your calm, but calm was your weapon. You knew the truth doesn't need noise. It only needs time, and time was always on your side. While they worked overtime to bury facts, those same facts floated back up like air bubbles underwater. Undeniable, unstoppable, impossible to hide. Imagine someone trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder they press, the more force it builds. That's what your silence did. It wasn't retreat. It was pressure building beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. And now it's happening. The truth is surfacing through whispers, through cracks in conversations, through undeniable patterns that even their allies can't ignore anymore. The beauty of it, you never had to force it. You didn't beg, you didn't scream, you didn't fight for validation. The truth spoke without you lifting a finger. They thought restraint meant you were finished. In reality, it meant you were finished watching. Your silence was never cowardice. It was wisdom. It was control. And now, as the truth does its work, the same silence they mocked has become their greatest fear. Because you never surrendered. You simply let reality do what it always does. Rise. Number 14. You didn't just survive the ritual, you now carry the manual to dismantle it. The system failed to destroy you, and in failing, it handed you its secrets. You didn't stumble through humiliation like some unlucky victim. You lived through a program, an organized cycle designed to isolate, ridicule, manipulate, and then dangle false reconciliation once you cracked. That's the script they run. Break you, then offer you a fake rescue so you never question who caused the fire in the first place. But here's the twist. They miscalculated. You didn't break. You decoded it. You saw their weapons for what they were. Shame used as control. Loyalty twisted into a leash. Concern repackaged as a trap. Every tactic revealed itself to you, one by one. And because you survived, you now hold something priceless. The blueprint. The very manual for dismantling the same system they tried to bury you inside. Your scars aren't just memories, they are maps. Your story is no longer just pain, it's a guide, a set of directions for those still trapped in the maze. You can show them where the traps are hidden, how manipulation disguises itself, and how to walk away with soul intact. What was meant to erase you has become clarity, knowledge, and weaponry. Imagine escaping a locked room, then handing the key to everyone else still inside. That's what you carry now. Your discernment didn't just save you, it shattered their program's biggest advantage: silence, confusion, and self-doubt. You proved their love was nothing but control. You exposed their loyalty as nothing but chains, and by doing so, you broke their monopoly on truth. You aren't just free, you're the evidence that freedom is possible. Your survival isn't just survival, it's revolution. You didn't just endure humiliation, you turned it into intelligence. You turned it into a weapon they can never reclaim. And now, your existence itself is a threat to the system because you carry the very instructions for breaking it apart. They tried to sacrifice you. Instead, you became the one thing they feared most, the blueprint for freedom. And here's the truth, chosen one, what was meant to humiliate you only crowned you with clarity. You survived the ritual, you decoded the program, and now you walk with a strength they can't erase. Their shame became your proof. Their games became your training, and their collapse became your rise. You are the evidence they never wanted exposed. If this message hit your spirit, press the like button, subscribe for more, and drop the number 77 in the comments so I know you're claiming your survival. Share this with another chosen one. Let the blueprint spread.